Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. This is slightly weird, but also just amazing. I can't imagine, 50 years, just brilliant. What I thought I'd just talk about a little bit is about what I did next, and then about some of the concepts that I really learned and on the masters that still influence my work today and have influenced the things that I've been doing. So, a quick, I haven't got many slides. Just my quick biog. So I did a mainstream psychology degree in Edinburgh, and I came to the masters wanting really to make an impact, a positive change, to do something to improve people's lives in the real world. And it's been really interesting listening to the previous talks, and some of the words I'm using, they're all there. Some slight disillusionment with mainstream psychology. And it was a recommendation from my dad, who had met David Uzzell at a Learning Through Landscapes project when he'd been at a school. And he said, I think you'd like this environmental psychology. And turns out he was right. Anyway, I found a course that really more than met my expectations in many ways. New concepts, wider thinking, fellow students and staff, both David Uzzell, David Cantor, and some of the other names that you've mentioned, taught me. And it made me want to, and from a range of backgrounds, as we've said, it made me want to learn more, and it led directly to my PhD here at Surrey, supervised by David, you didn't mention that bit, but which looked at place attachment and place identity in the context of changing environments in the London Docklands. And I do remember it was quite unusual at the time, because it was a psychology department, and the environmental psychology people were always doing more interesting things, it seemed to me. We were always not really in the department. We were going out and doing stuff and, doing things in the outside world. And that was great. And I did my PhD, which was fascinating and really interesting, and again, changed my way of thinking. And it led me to a postdoc, which was my first foray really into environmental regulation and policy. Looking at risk perception, actually, which is another theme that's been continuous with me, in the context of a chemical incinerator at that time, and the role of place attachment, working beyond psychology in an interdisciplinary team. We had economics, social anthropology, sociology, and I think chemical engineer. I know Glynis was part of that team as well. And I carried on at the university teaching some environmental psychology, some research methods, and also supervising some dissertations. And I supervised 2 PhDs, for which it was a huge privilege. That of Gerda Speller, some of you know Gerda very well, an amazing PhD, and also Sahandra Kiplagat, who did some work in Madagascar. But I had always really not wanted to become an academic. So when a job came up at the Environment Agency, I went for it. And I joined as their first social issues officer in a multidisciplinary team. And I found that my experience was really relevant. The psychological theories and methods, together with the knowledge of environmental regulation and policy. And I helped there to build up their social science research base, especially in relation to social impacts, institutional arrangements of flood risk management, but also a lot about environmental regulation across nuclear, chemicals, water, land. And working alongside natural scientists made me an even greater proponent of social science. And then I wanted to do the research and not commission it. So I made a move out to a very tiny environmental consultancy, Collingwood Environmental Planning. There were never more than 10 of us. And we had a focus on the public sector, using evidence to help inform changes in environmental policy and practice, still promoting the use of social science theories, methods. And 2 years ago, our company was integrated into a larger company, Eunomia, which has a history in very practical in waste management, circular economy and sustainability, and a real passion to make a positive impact and to address challenges to the natural environment. And so currently I am directing and working in small teams. I have about 7 projects. I still do very hands-on stuff. I was saying today I was only reviewing a questionnaire that needs to go out. We do work for Natural England, DEFRA, the Environment Agency, and at the moment we've got work on farmers' engagement in citizen science projects through to understanding how local planning authorities take account of water challenges in their spatial planning processes. So quite a wide range of things. Next slide. And in preparing this, I wanted to think about the different concepts that I really learned about on the MSc and really that I still use today. So, and some of these have all been mentioned before actually. So the first one was participation in design and planning, which I think, David, was one part of your course, and also thinking about that in architecture and planning. And that really opened up ideas around who places are for, who decides, who's affected by changes, and how participation process can be inclusive and fair, and where does the power lie. And through my PhD and my work at the Environment Agency, I learnt more about impact assessment for large projects, chemical plants, flood defences, and specifically the lack of focus on the impacts on people's way of life, daily routines, the social impacts. And that kind of paved the way for work. One of the projects was on the Mersey Gateway Bridge, the social impact assessment for that, which we were part of. Plus, more recently, the development of more innovative approaches to social impact assessment of policies using dialogue processes rather than just consultation, looking at social impacts rather than economics or just environmental. And very recently, I was doing workshops in Scotland with fishers, looking at the social impacts of implementing marine protected areas on their ways of life. Theory of place, psychology of place. This really gave me the tools to think about psychological alongside the physical, material aspects of life, not to give way to determinism, and to understand the systematic ways in which we use spaces and those rules of place. As I said in my PhD, I got an interest in place, attachment and identity, and how we bond or don't with places, and what consequences that might have for actions, and what does that mean when physical spaces change. And I think that learning I then took through into understanding social impacts of flooding and what happens to your identity when your home may become an unsafe place. And theory of place, although I don't use it explicitly, well, now I'm thinking I should get back to that, made me attend to physical places in which behaviours are enacted. And interestingly, now in the natural environment policy world, there's currently a lot of talk about place-based projects, perhaps, again, a recognition of the importance of locating behaviours in space. Behaviour in emergencies, which was alluded to as well. Think about how people behave in disasters, specifically flyers and football stadium disasters, gave me several things. Firstly, I am always the first person to leave when there's a fire alarm. But it led to research into perception of risk in my postdoc, and those were really important issues, risk perception, risk communication in the Environment Agency, really important to think about in terms of the regulation of certain industries, understanding how we talk about risk and how to see it from different perspectives. And again, linking understandings of risk perception with flood risk management led me to work around community resilience to flooding, with it looking at the different components and how it's associated with different factors. And we did develop a framework for evaluating community resilience to flooding, which we did as part of a large project for DEFRA some years ago. And resilience in the context of climate change remains a key theme in my work. And then thinking beyond psychology. As I say, I started the master's slightly disillusioned with mainstream psychology. I felt it was quite narrow and experimentally focused, and it didn't seem to be dealing with the challenges of the day. The master's from day one went beyond psychology. It brought in architecture, planning, history, sociology, economics. I felt I wanted to solve real-world problems, and that needed a range of disciplinary tools. Ever since, I have worked in teams with people from across disciplines in my postdoc at the EA and currently, and I really like it. It does force you to communicate without jargon, although we probably create our own jargon, and it has taught me about other ways of framing and solving problems, and it has made me very keen on definitions. And finally, research methods. So again, I think I just kind of echo what's been said before. I think that's been one of the, the sort of most useful things, but or more accurately, innovative research methods. On the Masters, we learnt about behaviour mapping, and we did some. And I loved that simplicity of the method of just observing, well, not just, but observing how seemingly unstructured space is used systematically by people. And though I've not managed to use it yet in a research project, it did make it into a recommendation for future research into water recreation a year or so ago. But social research methods and the value of social data collected by them is a key theme that's run through my work, collecting and systematising attitudes, values, behaviours and emotions in relation to environmental policy and which is where I am at the moment, is vital for those policies to be effectively implemented. And I think it's just more, you know, we can't really underestimate that value. And lastly, policy evaluation has become a key strand of work for myself and my team. And then really just finally, alongside all the concepts and the work, the glue that keeps it all together has been the development of amazing relationships and networks through conferences, being part of IAPS, working with great colleagues and friends on projects, and being part and feeling part of a wider community of environmental psychologists, for which I'm very thankful.